Death from a hotel window in Sheffield yesterday is believed to have just arrived from Afghanistan with his family. It's been reported that the boy arrived 4 days ago after fleeing the Taliban. US Capitol Police are responding to reports of a possible explosive device in a truck near the Library of Congress. Authorities have evacuated people in the area. Police say they're working to determine whether the device was an explosive and if the man in the truck was holding a detonator. An inquest has heard the Plymouth gunman Jake Davison argued with his mother just before killing her and 4 other people. The coroner's investigation into the deaths of the victims began this morning. Manchester United legend Dennis Law has been diagnosed with dementia. The 81-year-old said in a statement that it won't be an easy journey, especially for his loved ones, but he's trying to be positive. That's your news on Talk Radio TV. More in half an hour.
This is Talk Radio.
Keeping you up to date across the UK. Online, on DAB+, and on the Talk Radio app.
Rob Rinder on Talk Radio.
Good afternoon, this is Rob Rinder. I'm with you on Drive Time until 7 o'clock on Talk Radio. Now, President Biden, Joe Biden's handling of the Afghanistan withdrawal was condemned as catastrophic and shameful on Wednesday as the House of Parliament delivered what is probably an unprecedented rebuke to a United States president. I mean, so much for the special relationship. I don't think we've ever seen anything quite like this as MPs and peers from across the political spectrum, including the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, put some of the blame, and just think, obviously it comes through the prism of democratic language, but you saw what Boris Johnson had to say. We couldn't stay because the Americans ran off. That's me putting it in my language. He put it less eloquently than I would have done. When he was talking about the Taliban's takeover and especially the chaos that ensued, and putting the blame squarely on Britain's closest ally. Mr. Biden, across the floor, was accused of throwing us and everybody else to the fire by pulling out US troops in the way that they did. And he was also called, and I think this was probably really the worst description, he was called dishonourable for criticising Afghan forces for not having the will to fight. And you heard the impassioned, emotional speech, especially from an army soldier, Tom Tugendhat, who was actually there. Here to give us the US reaction to the Afghanistan situation, live from Washington, D.C., is the White House correspondent for Real Political News, John Christopher, or as I like to call him, seeing as he teaches this stuff, Professor John Christopher Buer. Professor Buer, I'm not sure whether you saw Parliament yesterday and what Boris Johnson had to say, but it was quite the day for the special relationship. I'd say it's become decidedly unspecial after that.
Well, it's come a long way since FDR and Churchill, I can tell you that. And when we lost the Brits, we've lost our own citizens. Mm-hmm. We are akin with you, and I understand, you can tell me if this is true, that the British are sending in paratroopers to take out their own people. Now, we're not doing that. And when the generals here were asked about that, they kind of fluffed that off, that they didn't really understand what the question was.
Yeah, we got that. The situation is that there has been some auxiliary force to provide some assistance and support to do whatever's possible on the ground to get those who assisted the British Army and, I should say, the US forces out of Afghanistan. But I'm not sure if you would have heard the person from Amnesty International on before. The difficulty is that these people have to identify themselves and get to an airport, which is now pretty much under the control of the Taliban. It is an absolute disaster, to say the very least. what we're really, I suppose, trying to gauge here is this is really the first time that an American president has been criticized so vehemently on the floor of the House of Commons. To what extent does that noise really have an impact or reach the halls of the White House or anybody other than the political classes in America?
We don't need to hear from the British to know what kind of shape this president is for his miscalculation and his misjudgment. We've got our own firestorm going here, Rob. Yeah. And I was there at the White House yesterday in a very rainy day where the chief of staff of the Joint Chiefs of Staff came over, as well as the Secretary of Defense, and tried to explain to the president exactly what went wrong. And when they went on a press conference later, as you saw, the president made a kind of changed the topic. Right. A press briefing yesterday at the East Room, where he wanted to talk about COVID booster shots. Right. But as you noted the other day, he took no questions from us, and he exited stage right, which shows that he is really, as some would think, disengaged, and he's not really taking this to heart. Although we all know he's a decent man, but the question is now his judgment, and basically who is responsible for this catastrophe.
Do you get the sense, as I do, looking increasingly at the discomfort of Jen Psaki, there's echoes of, you may remember, the spokesperson for President Bill Clinton, who would come out every day as the Rwandan genocide was unfolding and issue the numbers, but refuse to use the word genocide because that would have triggered the US and international obligation under international law, that she is increasingly becoming uncomfortable in defending this position. And that, to me, perhaps connotes a disquiet in the White House, certainly across the West Wing. Do you think that's right, or do you think they're squarely behind Joe Biden loyally? Well,
she'll send out other individuals to face the magic or the crowd. And Jen's a good woman, but I mean, look what she has to defend. Right. I mean, I remember Pierre Salinger during JFK. I remember Mike McCurry during Bill Clinton. These were very polished individuals, but they didn't have this kind of a policy to sell. And she's not a policy person. Right. She's a spokesperson. And she didn't make this stuff up. We only like to know who is responsible, whether it's the State Department, whether it's our diplomatic corps, the Defense Department, or the fact that they're now saying, well, yes, we have the airport is free. We're taking people out, but we can't guarantee any of the Americans. That's 10,000 Americans who are stranded across Afghanistan. And why in the world, Rob, I'm asking you, maybe you know, did the Americans shut down Bagram Air Force when they knew that this catastrophe would be looming?
If I had the answer to that question, I wouldn't be sitting here. I have my deep-seated suspicions. I think it was hurried. Undoubtedly, the advice of the National Security Team will need to be considered, and no doubt in due course. I hope that there is as robust a Senate and a congressional hearing as there was.
Well, they're requesting that already.
As there was when Hillary Clinton was hauled over the coals over what happened in Libya. It seems to me that there needs to be something as robust as that when we reflect.
Also need to have a hearing on January 6th, which is now taking a back seat to another date. So it's total politics. Mm-hmm. As you know, we've mentioned the other day, we have our midterms coming up in a year's time. And this is all fodder for the Republicans. And wait till they start showing those horrendous videos that I'm frightful to imagine what they're going to be seeing.
Can I just two things before I could talk to you all day? I'm not sure whether to call you John Christopher, Mr. Buer, or I like Professor Buer. That does.
Well, my students call me Prof. JC.
Okay, Prof. JC will do me.
Yeah, it's kind of cute.
Yeah, that's well. I think that lands for us here. So Prof. JC makes you sound like a rapper as well, which is good. Tom Tugendhat, I'm not sure whether you watched him. I would really advise you to do it. I've tweeted it. He was an ex-service man who served in Afghanistan, who spoke yesterday very movingly. And one of the things that he said in Parliament was, my language, not his, how devastated he was that President Biden had criticized the Afghan army, who he fought alongside. I really invite you to watch that. You know, what President Biden said is, in effect, why should we defend a country whose army aren't prepared to defend its own nation? And I've had guest on after guest, expert after expert, talk about the sacrifices that have been made by that army. Many of them died in droves, in legions greater than the US forces, the British forces, and our Western allies. And I hope that's something that you can reflect on and help us with. I hope that there's some pushback in America about that, because if that narrative lands, that in effect the Afghanis were too weak to hold on to their own nation, that strikes me as something which is not only wrong, but a cruelty and a libel against a whole, well, army of people that lay down their lives.
The Afghani people and the Afghani military knew that the fix was in a year ago when our former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, went over there and asked them to release Abdul Ghani Baradar.
Right.
And now he is I guess you would say, the new emir of Afghanistan. And that was the deal. And you also know that the Taliban met in Russia and they met in China. And you know very well, Rob, that Afghanistan is a mineral-rich country, that Putin and the Chinese and Pakistanis are salivating to get their hands in there. And Joe Biden fell into the trap.
Well, it certainly seems to me that, the geopolitical chess game is played very, very badly by the West. That years ago we had men and women of strength, character, vision and strategy. And these days we have a bunch of weak apology. But that's something you and I may or may not agree on, perhaps when I come and see you over there, Professor JC. But before I go to break, one thing I am worried about is I've just heard that there's an active bomb threat investigation that's happening after a pickup truck was reported near US Congress. First of all, are you safe, and what have you heard about it?
Yes, I'm about 2 miles away, and unlike on the January 6th, US Capitol Police said they are checking the suspicious vehicle near the Library of Congress, and the Cannon, Jefferson, and I'm reading this, and Madison office buildings have been evacuated.
Right.
And this is, as you can see, you've got to look like you have a live shot there.
Yeah, we've got it.
The library is located at Independence Avenue and Second Street, right across from the U.S. Capitol. This is deja vu all over again, and we are terrified that this country is going to become rife for more protests from the right wing, from the extreme right, and they're going to take this bit of weakness by Joe Biden as someone who shouldn't be serving president. And there's even question about whether or not he should resign or not, but that's not your show.
It's not my show yet, but it's something that we can reflect on and will be very much helped by you, as we have today. Everybody, that it was the correspondent for Real Political News, John Christopher Buer, or as we like to call him on our show, the man that knows American politics, Prof. JC. On that note, I'm going to be with you till 7 o'clock. This is Rob Rinder on Talk Radio. And after the break, something completely different. And at 5 o'clock, stay tuned, because, boy, have we got something fun and interesting for you. Rob Rinder on Talk Radio.
Online, on DAB, and on the Talk Radio app. Talk